Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. So I'm really excited to have you click on this video. So if you've been following the HTML and CSS playlist on the channel, I want to say congratulations because you've learned quite a number of things. You've covered the grounds as far as creating, beautiful user interfaces is concerned. HTML and CSS is pretty much the foundation of web as we know it, especially when it comes to front-end web development. You've just covered the foundation. Okay, so what I want to do in this video is to show you how you can put together everything you've learned so far and create something useful. Okay, so usually when you tell someone you know HTML and CSS, the best way to prove it is to be able to build some sort of web pages and demonstrate that. And that is why um, when you are applying for job as maybe a junior front-end developer, you get tasks like, okay, can you code a simple login page? Right, using HTML and CSS, can you build a simple login page? It's a very popular interview question, and the reason is very simple because it's one of the useful things you can do with your HTML and CSS skills. So that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. I'm going to show you how you would approach such tasks of building a simple login page. Okay, so I'm going to show you step by step how you can do that, starting from writing the markup using your HTML and then applying style with CSS. Okay, so join me. And then if you are still not if you're not confident of your knowledge of HTML and CSS fundamentals, things like um, HTML elements and attributes and stuff like that, I'll suggest you go over the HTML and CSS playlist and just to understand the basics, the foundation, and then you can come back to this video and we'll build this cool login page together. Okay, so let's get started. You can see my HTML file and my CSS file are pretty much empty, so we're going to build everything from the ground up. So um, in the head section of my HTML, you can already see we have a meta tag that describes the character set UTF-8. We have another meta tag that defines the viewport. We have another one, a link tag that brings in the CSS file inside this HTML document, and then we have the title that simply says simple login page. Okay, so let's start. Because it's a simple login page, we are going to make the form. It's basically going to be a form with at least two fields for email and for password, and then a button for the user to log in. Of course, we're not implementing the actual functionality to log in, but we're gonna make it look real. Okay, it's normal HTML login page. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a div with an ID of container. So that's going to be what is going to contain everything. Okay, so now to create a div with an ID of container, I have a little trick that I use. So rather than saying div and then I'll put ID and then I'll put container. Okay, so this works. Sorry, it's container. This works, but there's a shorter way to do it. And again, if you don't understand what this is, then you might want to check out the HTML and CSS playlist on this channel. Okay, so the way you do it, the shortcut is to start with a dollar sign if you want to create an element with if you want to create a div, right? If you don't specify any tag to create a div with an ID of whatever I call it, so I'm going to call it container, and I'm going to just hit tab, and that's it. Creates that for me. Then I want to create another div with an ID of wrapper, and I hit tab, and it creates that for me. And then finally I want to have an h2 and no class, no ID, just that. Actually, let me just say login for now. Okay, so that's what says that this is a login page. And then we're going to have a form. So the form is going to take a class of login form. Now hit tab. Now we are not going to implement the actual functionality to login, so we're not going to need this action attribute. Now inside the form, I'm going to have a couple of things. So for each field there will be a label and an input field. So those two are going to go into a div, and because I'm going to have multiple of such divs, I'm going to create that div and give it a class name. So use class to put a group of elements together that you want to style with the same. Actually, this should be an ID. So the div is going to take a class because we're going to have multiple of such divs. So class allows us to apply the same style to more than one element. So we're going to have div. So if it's a class, it's going to be a period, and the class we're going to call it is form control. Okay, so the first thing is the label. So we're going to have a label. So label takes a for attribute. Actually, this is going to be email. This is going to be email. We're going to get rid of this guy. I'll tell you what this for attribute does in a minute. So but then let's have an input. So you have an input type of email. ID is email, name is email, and it's going to be required. Now what required means is that you can't submit the form if you don't fill this field, and that makes sense because why would you want to submit a login form? Why would you want to allow a user to submit a login form without actually typing their email? So required forces the user to type their email before they hit the submit button. Type is the type of data that the user can type. So if the user doesn't type a valid email, they won't also be able to submit. Thanks for this type attribute. Then ID is what associates this input to this label. Remember that the for attribute needs to be, the value of the for attribute in the label needs to be exactly the same with the value of the ID attribute in the input field. Okay, so we're going to have another of this, and that would be for the password. So everything here that is email, we're going to hit Command D, and we're going to change everything email to password. Okay, except for here that is going to be capitalized, and it's also required, of course. Okay, so that's fine. And then finally we want to have a button. The button will have a type of submit, and then the text on the button just says submit or login, sorry. Okay, so I think our template is done. Our markup is done. We're going to move over to CSS. So what we've done, let's go over the structure. We have one wrapper inside one container div inside the body. This is the container that holds everything, and then we have a wrapper. We're going to style this wrapper to have some outline that shows that this is a login. And then we have a login text, and then we have the form. Now inside the form we have a div for the email and the email input and the label. We have another div for the password input and the label. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so let's move over to our CSS. So the first thing we want to do is to define some base style. So the body, we're gonna say let the body, actually let's even run. Okay, it's fine. Let's run it and see what we have. Open with live server. Okay, so this is our simple login page. This is what it's like at this point. Yep, so we want to do some base styling. So the margin is going to be 0, and the padding is going to be 0, and it's going to have a background color. So background color is going to be dark. I'm going to give it some dark background color, It's not black, but it's gonna be some so let's say, no, actually let's do CCC. This is some gray background. Actually, let's make it darker. We just use the color picker here to pick a darker, not exactly black, but that's, okay. So I think this is fine. Yep, this is fine. So this is the color code. I'm gonna use this. So you see our text disappeared. The next thing we want to do is to bring this to the center. So to do that, all we need to do is to style this guy. We want to convert this guy into a flex box, and that should bring everything to the center. So we start by styling our container. Forgot to put the container here, and then we say display flex. Again, if you don't understand how flex box works, I have a series of videos on flexbox on this CSS playlist, so you just check the playlist. I'll leave a description to that playlist. I'll leave a link to that playlist in the description of this video, and you can check it out. So what flexbox does is basically when you give a display property to a particular element and give it value of flex, it converts that element to flex box and allows you to use flex properties to define the layout of that particular element, which is what we are doing here, right? Remember that this guy is the overall container, so we are using flexbox to define how we position things within that container. Okay, so display flex. Another flex property we're going to use is justify content. Justify content, we're going to say center. We want to center everything, and we'll say align items. We're also going to say center, and then we save, and everything is at the center, but it is a horizontal alignment. We want it at the center both horizontally and vertically, which means we want it somewhere here, not here. The way we can do that is to make sure that this guy here has a height that is the same as the height of the entire viewport. This is because we want the content to be at the center of the viewport, not the center of the div. Okay, so we want to give it a height that is the same as the viewport. So we're going to say height, and then we say 100 viewport height. Okay, so that will center everything just like we want it. Now, something else we want to do is to give a font family. So the font family we want to give it a group of font family, and the way font family works, you specify a group of font families. The reason you want to specify more than one is in case one font is not available on a particular browser, you can fall to the other one. If that's not available, it goes to the other one, and so those are what we call fallback fonts. Okay, so we have some predefined fonts that we can use. I want to get the one that has Roboto inside it. I think it's this one. Okay, so these are a group of fonts, and it's going to basically select. Now this is a generic font, so these are generic fonts. Basically, if all the rest are not available, at least one of these must be available. Okay, so let's see what it looks like. Okay, cool. Next thing we are gonna do, actually, okay, so we also want to convert this guy to a flex box. Remember, we have a wrapper here. We have a wrapper div here, so we want to also convert that to a flex box. So we'll say ID of wrapper. Now the reason we want to do that is, okay, so let's say display is gonna be flex. Okay, flex direction is gonna be column, so that is gonna take things up. And what else? Actually, what else do we want to do? Justify content is going to be center, and align items is also going to be center, and we save that. So that brings this guy here to the center. Okay, now another thing we want to do, you see how each of this field is aligned. You know, we have two divs. One is for the email with the label and the input. So this is the label, this is the input. That's for the first div with a class of form control. This is it here. This is it here. So what we want to do is we want the email to be on top of the inputs, not side by side. So what we would do is we take this class, the form control class, and we convert it to a flexbox. So we'll say form control, and then we'll say display, and it says flex. Of course, doesn't change anything because the default direction is row, so they are still going to be on one line, but I'm going to force it to stack the label on top of the input by giving it a flex direction of column. Cool. You see, the email is on top of the input. Now something else I want to do is to give it a margin bottom of top and bottom top and bottom, I say 20 pixels. Left and right, we'll say auto. Actually margin, not margin top. Okay, so we have this now. Okay, something else we want to do is to, inside this wrapper, we want to make all the text color white. So we're just gonna say color, and white is gonna be 3 F's like that. So the text are white. Okay, of course this is taking shape, but it's still not exactly what we want. So the next thing we want to do is to remove this guy. So when I click on this, you see I'm getting this autocomplete. That may not be what you want. So to get rid of it, you can go to your email input and add autocomplete, and just say off. Okay, yep, and that does it. Okay, so if you say on, it stays there. Turn it back on, which is the default, I guess, stays there, but we don't want it, so we say off. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to, of course, style each of these inputs. So the way we are going to do that is we have this form control div, and inside the div we have input. So we want to style each of the inputs. So we combine the selectors, class of form control inputs, and then what do? We give it a height. We give it a height of, say, 60 pixels. Actually 60 pixels. Isn't that too big? Okay, so let's give it a width of 200 pixels. Okay, let's make it 300. Let's reduce this to 50. Okay, I think that's fine. Now we want to remove the outline, so we want to say outline none. The outlines are gone. Now we want to increase the font size. So if I type into this, the text are very small, so we want to increase the font size. So font size is going to be, now there's something you need to know about units. If I put a font size of, let's say, 20 pixels, now pixels is an absolute unit, which means 20 pixels on a small screen is going to be 20 pixels on a big screen. Okay, which, so you're going to have a situation where the text looks fine on a big screen, but when you go to small screen, it's too big because the pixel, it's a fixed unit, it doesn't change. But we can use relative units, which changes with the size of the screen. And the way relative units work is they work with something called relative units. So we have the which is em as a relative unit, and then we have rem, which is also another relative unit. The difference is m is relative to the element itself or its closest parent, while rem is relative to the root element, which is the HTML element. Okay, so that's the reason. So when we do things with, it's always preferred to use the relative unit as opposed to the the fixed units. Okay, so let's say for instance, if you want to use relative units now, if you want to use rem, remember that the root element is HTML, and by default it has some certain let's say font size. For instance, you know what, let's stick to the font size. Font size by default is 16 pixels, right? So if I say to rem, so what I'm saying is 16 times 2, that is 32 pixels, right? So that's what this is 32 pixels. Okay, so I can say maybe 1 point, or you know what, 2m. Okay, so you just watch this, and then if I do 2m and 32 pixels, actually it's rem, and I save, you see it's pretty much the same. Okay, so we're gonna stick to rem, so we're gonna say 1.5 rem actually. Okay, 1.5 rem. So now you can see it's like hitting the edge of the input, so we're going to fix that. So we're going to say padding, padding is going to be, padding top is fine, so top and bottom is going to be auto, and left and right is going to be, let's say 10 pixels. Okay, did it create padding top and bottom, left and right? 10 pixels seems small, so let's make it 30 pixels. Okay, so let's, oh yeah, it's the input, so let's actually let's just say padding left. Okay, 30 pixels is a lot, so 10 pixels should be fine. Yeah, 10 pixels is fine. So we also want to give it some, actually we can give this guy a placeholder also. So let's say placeholder should say please enter your email or username, and then the placeholder here should be please enter your password. Okay, so looks like this is too much, so let's leave it at 1 rem. Okay, so let's give it some merge. some border radius, so say border radius of 6 pixels. Border is going to be none. Okay, I think this is still very, so now we can increase this to 60 pixels. Okay, actually we can make this 1.5 now, or let's make it 1.3. Or 1.2. Okay, this is better. Okay, let's make these labels look better. So from control, actually we do the labels first. So we're gonna use the same font size. We'll save it. We're going to give it create a space here by putting a margin bottom. So we'll say margin bottom 0.5 rem. Hold on. Oh, form control. This should actually be label. Okay. Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot of margin. That's still a lot of margin. So let's do 0.8. Oh, I was actually changing the font size, not the margin. I think the font size is fine. Actually, the font size should be 1.5 and the margin should be 0.8. Okay, and the margin of this guy should increase. The margin bottom should increase to like 26 pixels. From control, margin bottom. You know what? Let's just use margin bottom and let's make it 2 rem. Okay, I think that's fine. Let's make this 0.5. Okay, I think the font size is a lot. Let's make it 0.2. Okay, I think this is fine. Let's work on our button. Actually, let's work on this guy first. Let's work on the login texts. So the login text is inside the wrapper. So we're gonna select ID wrapper and wrapper and H2. So we just want to say font size and we want to make that 3 rem actually because we want it to be visible. Yeah, this is fine. Let's give it a text align. I've left. Oh, okay, so we have a justify content center and align item center on this guy, so text align may not work. So what we can do is to take out the align item and brings it to the left. This is what we want. Okay, so something else we want to do is to have this guy have a background. Actually, on a second thought, so let's create some sort of border around this guy. Let's say border 2 pixels, solid, and white. Okay, so it looks like this. So now we know we need some padding. So I want to create a padding of 30 pixels. Let's check that out. Okay. So let's do 30 pixels top and bottom, and maybe 50 pixels left and right. Okay, just like that. So you know what? We're gonna leave this background color as white, and we're gonna change this text as black. Okay, and we are going to give our inputs some border. Actually, we are going to give our wrapper a background color instead. So we'll give it a background color. So let me take this back a bit. So this background color, we are going to give it to our wrapper. So let's give it this background color, BGC. Yep. Okay, so okay, bear with me, I'm not a great designer, but I think we can work with this. Let's lighten it up a bit. Let's make it a bit lighter. Okay. Then the next thing we want to do is to style our button. Okay, so you see when I try to click on this button, it tells me please fill out this field, and that is because of the attributes we added to the required attributes basically. So yeah, just to recap the changes we've made, we've removed the background color on the body. We don't need that anymore. Instead, we added the background color on the wrapper. Okay, so something else we want to add here is we want to give it a shadow. We want to create some shadow effects around this. So we're gonna say box shadow. So box shadow, the first is the vertical offset. We're gonna do 0 pixels. Then we have the horizontal offset. We're gonna do 4 pixels. Then we have the shadow size. We're gonna say this 10 pixels, and then finally we have the color. Okay, so we are going to use I'm gonna use something like, maybe let's use the same color, and that's what it gives us. Okay, so it gives us this shadow effects. Let's see if we increase this. Okay, it's not looking bad, and we can even increase it to kind of bring it off from the screen. Okay, so you can just keep adjusting it until you get what you want. Okay, so we can increase this to 40. Yeah, so this kind of helps create some sort of floating effect, um, and I think it's really cool. Now let's style the button. So we go to the button. The button is just button. So let's just give it an ID. So we say btn, and then we come here and we say slash btn. So the first thing we want to do is to make this. We want to make this guy. Let's make it bigger, obviously. So we want to give it a width of 200 pixels. Yeah, that's quite wide. And then we'll give it a height of 50 pixels. Okay, that's cool. And we want to make the text on it bigger, so we want to say font size and 1.3 RAM. Okay. Okay, I think that's fine. So we may want to give it a little bit of a curved edges, and we achieve that with border radius of, let's say, 3 pixels. Border radius 3 pixels seems to be small. We don't want the borders, so we'll say border none. Okay, cool. Now something we may want to do is to have some sort of hover effect on the button. So we're gonna say button. So we want this style to apply when we hover on the button. Actually, let's give this button a pointer. Cursor of pointer, sorry. So cursor property. So when we hover over it, we get this little hand icon. And then we want to do this hover thing. So what we want to do is that when we hover on this, we want to create an illusion of the size of the button increasing. But for that, we want to actually make it smaller here. Let's give it, let's say 180 pixels. Okay, so 180 pixels, and this is gonna be 45 pixels. You see, when we hover on it, it kind of creates an illusion of getting bigger. We actually want to work on the text, so here it should be 1 rem. And let's make it 1.2 is fine. Okay, so when we click on it, it gets bigger. But we want to add some sort of animation to it. Hold on. It should get bigger here, not here. So this should be 1.2 and this should be 1.3. Okay, so it should get bigger. Yep. So let's give it transition. Transition is going to be easy in, and it's going to be it's going to complete in 0.5 seconds. Yeah, so it just grows gradually. I think 0.5 seconds is a lot, so let's make it 0.3. Okay, so click on it. I also want a color change, so let's make the background maybe a little bit darker than, I don't know, Okay. Okay, so you can play around with this until you get what you want. Um, I think this is cool. This is cool. With a shadow, we can get rid of the border on the wrapper. Where do we have a border? Yeah, on the wrapper we have a border. So with the shadow thing going, we can pretty much get rid of the wrapper and sorry, can get rid of the border. Yep, I think this is cool. So you can go ahead and make it better the way you want, but I think this is pretty cool. So usually when you are working on a real project, you would have some design reference. Maybe you have a design team, you know, to make the design a lot better. We didn't work with any design reference. The idea was to show you how you can structure your code. Um, Sometimes this could be a logo, right? It could be an image of the company logo. Usually the design reference could be a Figma design or a Photoshop design of what um, the 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 login page is going to look like. So in that case, it's going to be a lot easier because you don't have to think about should this button be big, should the background be white. You have a design reference that you are actually looking at, so you know the background color, you know the size of how big the labels can get. Yeah, but then here we don't have that. But I do hope you got the point, which is how to structure your code in terms of the markup and the CSS. Okay, so leave a comment if leave a comment of what you think about this video, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.